Global economic recovery remains sluggish, primarily due to a confluence of setbacks, including the lingering effects of supply chain disruptions and geopolitical events, and the increasing cost of living across many economic blocs. The disruptions in energy and food prices and efforts to combat record high inflation through tightening global monetary policies have considerably slowed down economic activity globally. According to the IMF's October 2023 World Economic Outlook, global economic growth is anticipated to decelerate from 3.5% in 2022 to 3% in 2023, and at best 2.9% in 2024. These projections are noticeably lower than the pre-pandemic historical average of 3.8% from 2000 to 2019. Projections of 3.1% global growth over the medium term are lowest in decades, and the prospects for countries to achieve higher living standards are also, therefore, bleak. We believe in lower taxes as a government for industry, and we are working at this aggressively with the GRA and to be cemented with the Standing Committee of the Mutual Prosperity Dialogue. Mr. Speaker, further to the above, the following reliefs have been prioritized for implementation. To extend, Mr. Speaker, the zero rate of VAT on locally manufactured African prints for 2 more years. Mr. Speaker, to waive import duties on import of electric vehicles for public transportation for a period of 8 years. Mr. Speaker, to waive import duties on semi-knocked down and completely knocked down electric vehicles imported by registered EV assembly companies in Ghana for a period of 8 years. Mr. Speaker, to extend zero rate of VAT on locally assembled vehicles for 2 more years. Mr. Speaker, to zero rate VAT on locally produced sanitary pads. Mr. Speaker, to grant import duty waivers for raw materials for the local manufacture of sanitary pads. Mr. Speaker, to grant exemptions on the importation of agricultural machinery equipment and inputs and medical consumables, raw materials for the pharmaceuticals industry. Mr. Speaker, a VAT flat rate of 5% to replace the 15% standard VAT rate on all commercial properties will be introduced to simplify administration. Government has renegotiated the contract terms of the large general hospital project and will now be funded through the national budget. The contractor is expected, Mr. Speaker, to be back on site next week to complete a significant amount of work by 2024. Seeking to change the course of the agriculture sector, the President in August 2023, with the new Minister of Agriculture, launched the Planting for Food and Jobs 2.0. By design, PFJ 2.0 places greater emphasis on value chain approaches and focuses on strengthening linkages between actors along eligible agricultural commodity value chains, broadly categorized into grains, roots, and tuber vegetables and poultry. PFJ has a special focus on poultry to address the heavy reliance on imports. Accordingly, 15 anchor farmers and 500 outgrowers in 5 regions, Ashanti, Greater Accra, Bono, East, and Eastern regions, will be selected to produce 65,000 metric tons of broilers in 2024. Mr. Speaker, the significant shortfall between demand and domestic production of vegetables requires urgent action, especially considering the impact of the recent supply disruptions from the Sahelian region. Government has renegotiated the contract terms of the large general hospital project, seeking to change the course. We will continue with all extended funded projects that will be resumed. However, the following projects are ongoing and at various stages of completion. Kumasi Lake Road and Drainage Extension Project is completed. Reconstruction of Bichem Techimanchia Akumadin Road is 71% complete. Construction of flyover on the Accra Tema Motorway from Flower Port Roundabout is 60% complete. Phase 2 of the Tema Motorway Roundabout, including construction of the third tier of the interchange, is 56% complete. Construction of 4 major bypasses at Osino, Enyinem, Inyirisi, and Konongo along the Accra-Kumasi Highway commenced in 2023 and at various stages of completion. Reconstruction of Agona and Kwantatoka Road is 44% complete. Dualization of 4 main roads and traffic management works 100% complete. Selected roads in Second D and Takoradi Phase 1 is 28% complete. Dualization of Nsawam of Fanko Road, including the widening of the road to 10 lanes over 6-lane expressway and 4-lane service road interchanges at Amasaman, Kobiman, Midyear, and Nsawam project is 30% complete.
The NPP government promised to move the economy from taxation to production. Today, we see a reverse gear, over taxation without production. Today, the finance minister has stabbed our brothers and sisters at Abosokai, Kokompe, Swame Magazine, and fitting shops across the country at their backs. Unfortunately, he failed to announce policies that will help reduce the suffering of the ordinary Ghanaian.
Okay, so welcome back. This is Inside Pages on Metro Television. My name is Aldo Moro. So you've just seen excerpts of the finance minister presenting the 2024 budget and also the reaction afterwards. So after the presentation of the budget which has been dubbed the Inkunim budget, to wit, the victory budget. And the finance minister explains this because the government is turning the curve or has turned the curve, meaning that things have improved drastically, meaning the targets have been met, etc. Would interrogate that. Let me quickly introduce my resource persons who joining me in the studio this morning to help us interrogate the budget, because they are you can call them the experts, yeah? Because this is what they do for a living. They study the numbers, they study the data, and they help we the mere mortals to understand what the data is saying. So let me just say that I have Mr. Joe Jackson. He's the Director of Operations. DLX Finance is here with us. Good morning, sir. Good to have you. You're more like our go-to person for Economics 101. You know, then we'll come to you quickly, you know. And then also, let me also say that I have the Honorable George Kweku Ricketts-Hagan, who is a Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South. He's also a member of the Finance Committee. Good morning, sir. Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you, sir. Yeah, and then also I have Dr. Abdul Ganiu. Dr. Abdul Ganiu is a management consultant and also a member of the MPP's communications team. Good morning, sir. It's good to see you. Now, you realize something has changed interestingly differently. I hope I got my construction right. But what it is the way I was standing. Yeah, we're standing because we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation this morning. Let me also say that I have Dr. Priscilla Trimisi Bafo, who's a senior lecturer, Department of Economics, University of Ghana, Legon. Doc, but she's joining us via Zoom. Doc, good morning. It's a pleasure having you on Inside Pages. First time, I believe.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Moro. Thank you very much for having me.
Doc is a very, very busy, even though she's probably, she's actually one of the most sought after analysts in the area of economics and finance, except that she's very busy, but she's been able to make time. We're grateful. Doc, I'll start with you because you have other things to do, other engagements to take care of. So, Doc, your general thoughts about the budget?
Thank you very much once again, and good morning to your viewers. I am not sure about the most sought after parts, but thank you for the compliment. Okay, Moro, as you indicated in the preamble, I think that this budget is peculiar in a number of ways. It came on the back of a lot of expectation by business owners in the country, because we have gone through a time of contraction with high levels of inflation. And so there was a lot of expectation, rightfully so. But I would also say that this is also the first budget under the current IMF program. And we also know that an IMF program is a program for macroeconomic stability. So essentially, when you look at the framing of the budget, the whole idea is to restore stability. We've seen that there are some appreciable levels of stability, quite volatile, but we still see it out there. So in that sense, and it is also coming at a time when Ghana will be moving into an election, is an election year. We always talk about election cycle impact, where we always overrun our budget and the implications come. So this is a very peculiar budget, and so I am not surprised that people are disappointed. But from where I sit, I think that it is what it is. Not much could be done. And so in that sense, the emphasis has been on fiscal consolidation, try and curtail expenditure, and also try to rake in some revenue in that regard. So when you look at the targets, so for example, if you look at the target for GDP growth for 2024, it is at 2.8%. This is a very conservative estimate, looking at where we have come from, where we have done an average of about 7% prior to COVID. And so it's an indicator that yes, all is not great. We have been able to maintain some relative stability on the exchange rate front. Inflation appears to be on a decent path of deceleration. So in that sense, I am not surprised the budget is what it is. For me, on the revenue side, the minister indicated the need to increase the tax to GDP ratio, but I do not see a lot of attempts that is being made in this current budget, to be honest. For example, when you look at the property rate issue. We have spoken significantly about the need to rake in a lot of revenue from property side. If nothing at all, we see that the skyline of Accra is changing, and people who have these investments must chip in here and there. So when you look at the property rate, he indicates there have been reforms. I know before it was ceded to the district assemblies to collect, with a lot of inefficiencies associated. And so for that matter, they are seeking to bring it to the consolidated fund. And so there needs to be changes in the law. The minister indicated in the budget that as a result of these reforms that have started, properties that are listed have moved from 1.3 million to 12.4 million properties. This right there, I see as an economist, is an opportunity to make a lot of revenue. Even if you estimate that on average, each structure is paying, let's say, a very minimal amount of 1,000 Ghana cedis a year, you would see that this is an avenue to rake in almost $1 billion into government coffers. So on that side, I think that the progress has been very slow, and for that matter, something needs to be done, because certainly the revenue is not adequate. When you come to other indicators, I was expecting that, for example, they would reinstate road tolls. I think it is important. I do not know of any country where there is no road toll at all. In this day, we talk about public-private partnerships, because resources are scarce. The private sector have resources, whether domestic or external. And if government needs to go into partnership for infrastructure, then the infrastructure ought to pay for itself. And these payments are through tolls and taxes. And for that, that is where I think that something should have been done. E-levy is not doing great, and so I would have expected that perhaps he could have reduced the rates and so discourage the zeal for people to avoid completely the tax. But it appears that nothing is done. And so for me, from a social perspective, I am also okay with the fact that all the social interventions have been maintained. I know that previously the IMF and the World Bank have had negative press with respect to the hardships that their austerity programs impose on the public. So in that sense, you see that all the social interventions have been kept. My expectation, I think that my point has been put out there over time, that as we move forward, free SHS needs to be reviewed for the relevant resources to move into the tertiary, secondary education, for quality education. Primary school level, there's a lot of complaints that now the emphasis is on secondary education, and the foundation is critical. So when you look at all these, I think that it is okay. In terms of the reliefs that have been granted, you find that rightfully so, in an attempt to maintain stability, the reliefs are quite conservative in the sense that government would not incur a lot in terms of lost revenue by these reliefs. You look at relief for example, there is the extension of zero-rated VAT on locally manufactured African prints. I think that it is there, it has been extended. And for me as a woman, I am excited about the zero VAT on sanitary pad. Women should not be disadvantaged, particularly women from poor backgrounds. The evidence shows that young girls, some of them have to stay out of school every month for a number of days because of this. It is a good start. A lot needs to be done as a society as we move on, but I think that it is okay. My only challenge really with a lot of the issues with the zero-rated VAT on this, on manufactured African prints, zero-rated VAT on locally produced sanitary pad, import waiver on raw materials for locally manufactured sanitary pads. This is a great initiative to stimulate local production. And so if we do not curtail inflation and maintain stability on the macroeconomic level, such a relief will not amount to much, because if cost of production increases, regardless of whether they are getting the inputs, the raw materials in at zero taxes, it will not make much difference. But for here, my caveat is that on condition that this macroeconomic environment is stabilized, then policymakers ought to also make sure that manufacturers do not take undue advantage by pocketing the rent that will be made as a result of these reliefs, but then they will translate the lower cost into lower prices on the market for the ordinary Ghanaian to feel it. Because we know that we've experienced in this country that sometimes taxes are taken off, but the products still remain at the same price, because essentially sellers or economic agents within that space would want to cash in on the excess rents, because this is a very essential product. It faces an inelastic demand. So whether the price goes up or down, people would buy. I think that the onus is on policymakers to track these things and also ensure that local producers have the necessary environment to be able to respond to the increase in demand that will come up as a result of the fact that their products will be facing a zero VAT on the market. In all this, My concern has been the movement for zero-rated taxes on a number of products. The reason is that within the WTO rules, sometimes it is emphasized that once a product enters into your market, you are not supposed to discriminate between imported product and domestic products by using taxation, because when you do that, you are introducing a barrier to trade. And as Ghana is championing Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I think that as time goes on, we need to move from treating these products differently, but rather use the imposition of the taxes at the point of entry, rather than allow the product to come in and begin to discriminate between domestic and imported product. Because bear in mind, when Ghanaian producers also send their products abroad, there is a concept of reciprocity. So if Nigeria or Kenya realizes that their products come to Ghana and the products are treated differently, then Ghanaian products would also face such limitations in these economies. So these are some of the moot issues that are in there. But I think for the short term, it is what it is.
I see. I've got just two questions to ask before you take leave of us. So my penultimate question to you will be, are we turning the corner based on everything else that you've said?
Okay, Moro, to a large extent, if you say something is turning a corner, what does it mean? It means that you are changing direction. Right. And so to that extent, if you look at the fact that now inflation has been consistently been on a deceleration path from a 50% high as of January to about 32%, there are some marginal gains over there. When you look at a GDP growth, projection was 1.5, it's been revised upwards. There are some underlying issues. When you look at depreciation of the currency, there is some relative stability on that front. So I would say that in that context, there have been some marginal gains, but these are quite fragile in the sense that inflation is still significantly high. It is fragile in the sense that we are moving into an election year. If inflation is not curtailed, expenditure is not curtailed on the government front, then these marginal gains would certainly be derailed in that context. But if you are tracking it specifically with the numbers in terms of budget deficit, for example, as at the end of 2022, I think the budget deficit was around 11.0. It is projected to end at 5.7 by the end of this year, and it is projected to be 4.8 by the end of next year. So when you track the trajectory from the change in 2019, 2020, the sharp increase in budget deficit from 2020, 11.7 to 2021, and then 2022, you see that there is some deceleration. But then at what cost is this corner turning coming? Bear in mind, we are achieving all these on the back of a very painful debt restructuring, for example. We are achieving these because currently Ghana has placed a moratorium on servicing on its debt. So in that context, we are making some progress, but the progress is very volatile unless we consolidate it, for example, by concluding external debt restructuring, curtailing government expenditure within the margins so that the appetite for borrowing is also curtailed. If you look at the treasury bills market, government is quite dominant in there. And when you finance government activities through a short-term instrument like the treasury bill, certainly it will come at a very high cost.
I see.
Unlike rolling out long-term bonds as we used to have. But now, because there are no options, that is where government is actively borrowing. Really.
Good. Now, there have been calls, in fact, there were calls prior to the presentation of the budget for taxes to be drastically reviewed, as in reviewed downwards, or a cut down taxes, in order for the business community to get some breathing space. In fact, there was a clarion call on the finance minister to scrap the e-levy, because if you consider the fact that the finance minister has been conferred a whopping amount of 61 billion cedis by way of fiscal space through the debt operations, and I'm talking about the DDP, would that have made sense if the finance minister has scrapped the e-levy and then looked at other taxes and reduced them drastically?
Within the confines of what the finance minister was dealing with, it was not going to be possible to be scrapping taxes here and there, because the reality is that revenue expenditure far outstrips revenue. And then the argument has been cut down expenditure significantly. Yes, we agree. If you are not able to bring in the resources, then cut your clothes. Cut your coat according to your cloth. But there are also important issues in government expenditure. For example, emolument payment of public sector workers constitutes significantly in terms of government expenditure. Okay. Payment of interest has been halted, but it will be reversed. So in that context, e-levy, for example, I think was a tax that should not have been introduced in the first place. And so you see that over time, given that it's a handle that is bringing in some amount of money, although quite meager, based on the estimations that were done prior to the introduction, I think that a reduction to 0.5 would have been okay. Would have made more sense if the finance minister has. Right. Yes, exactly.
I see. And also there's talk about the COVID-19 levy, and that there's no justification for us to leave the COVID-19 to be to live on our books, because we're not dealing with COVID anymore. Brief thoughts on that, and then you can please end with your opinion on what the finance minister said when he says, Mr. Speaker, the 2024 budget is even more significant because we will cross the 1 trillion Ghana domestic products, of course, GDP mark, for the first time in our economic history. Let me repeat, Mr. Speaker, Ghana's economy under President Akufo-Addo's final year in office is projected to be valued at 1 trillion cedis in 2024 from the 219.5 billion in 2016. So if you can box the two together in a few minutes, I'll be more than happy.
Thank you, Moro. I think that there's been a lot of calls for the scrapping of COVID-19 levy. But to be honest, it is a levy that has brought in a quite substantial amount of money, and I think that it will be difficult for them to take it out. I have had a number of discussions on other platforms where people are very passionate that COVID is out, so it should be out. I think that if you have followed the trajectory on economic policy in Ghana, it is difficult to introduce a tax handle. So whenever a tax handle is introduced and it becomes efficient in collecting revenue, it's also quite difficult to take it off. If you take the COVID-19 levy off right now, where else is government going to be able to rake in the amount of monies that the levies are coming in? Okay. I think that, for instance, they should be able to, whether to rebrand it somehow and divert the resources that are coming to the health sector. I think that it's an avenue. For now, I would be very surprised if it had been touched indeed. And so when you move into the discussion on the GDP moving into a trillion, 1 trillion by 2024. The question you ask is, GDP is the value of goods and services produced within a country. And so when you are looking at value, you are looking at price multiplied by what? The quantity, right? If the quantity remains the same and the price doubles, you can double the value without necessarily recognizing any change in the value at all. So in that context, I think that the discussion should be situated in looking at the dollar value of the GDP that we are looking at. When you do that, you denote that in dollar context. Then you take away the local inflation, you take away the issues of the depreciation of the currency. But for me, I think that if you are trying to compare records with regards to the economic performance, we should situate the discussion in the context of the welfare, the quality of life of the average Ghanaian. And when you are moving in there, then you are talking about per capita income, for example, where on average, how much is every Ghanaian worth? And even that discussion is only based on income. Why don't we track indicators such as the Human Development Index, where there you will be looking at the quality of education, you'll be looking at the quality of healthcare available to the people, and you are also looking at income. I think the discussion should move beyond just nominal figures to look at whether this growth is being transformational in nature, in a sense that it is changing the lives of people in a better way. I think that those are what the concern should be, and not necessarily just about the nominal value of the GDP, because the nominal value does not really make much sense.
All right, Doc, it's been brilliant. It's been awesome having you on the show this morning. We really and truly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Moro, for having me, and all the best to your panelists.
I wish you same, and have a good weekend. Now, let me just say this, that Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafwa is a senior lecturer, University of Ghana, that's the economics department, and she's made time to talk to us this morning to tell us to share her perspective on what she makes of the 2024 budget. But there are more perspectives that will be shared. In fact, this time around is going to be a lecture, so please stay tuned in, because he's a businessman, but he's also a lecturer. He would walk us through the fine details of some aspects of the budget. It's a voluminous document. He can't walk us through everything, but there are some salient issues that Mr. Joe Jackson is going to be walking us through. Mr. Joe Jackson, what should we be expecting?
It's definitely not a lecture.
Right.
I'm just sharing a few of my thoughts on what the budget and its implications, with a bit of a focus on what happens to the man in the street. You
Absolutely.
know, sometimes we can talk at a very high level, and we forget that really the budget doesn't mean anything if I was in Aboso Kai when on Thursday when the budget was being read, and the guys in the streets, they don't care about the budget. They only care about what difference it will make to them.
You hear them ask sometimes, "Yate petrol swana."
Those are the things at Aboso Kai, the predominant question was, there were two issues. A bank has Obesi Hospital, we see hospital near who baby edu. You say maybe baby import duty you to mean your spare parts. Those are the issues really. And it's so easy for us to come to a platform like this and talk GDP growth and this. They are extremely important and they matter. But I want to really basically break it down a little bit and say, share my thoughts where the common man is concerned.
So as you approach the screen to share your thoughts on what you make of the budget, let me just say this, that a senior lecturer, doesn't want to mention his name, he's sent me a message, and he says, "Good morning, Mr. Moro. It is not true that we're not servicing our debt. We have only suspended servicing bilateral and foreign commercial loans, but we're still servicing multilateral loans, World Bank, IMF, AFDB loans." Thanks, Doc. We'll see whether our resource persons agree with you. All right. Mr. Joe Jackson, before you go ahead, let me just say it's 0249-155646. 0249-155646. For those of you who want to share your thoughts on what we're having or what we're talking about this morning, 0249-155646. Mr. Jackson, please go ahead.
Moro, this picture for me here
Okay.
is representative of where we are,
Right.
right? We all know the proverb. Se kwatre kwasi obema untuma yeden. Tieni din. Really, it's a tough one. I think all the expectations were misguided. They were misguided because there was nothing to be, what do you call it? There was nothing there. And I put this picture here to represent this gentleman that I call Kwatrikwa. He's broke. Asking him, thinking that he's going to change things for you is misguided. So, first of all, I think all of us have to, and this I'm speaking to the man in the street, he has to understand that Abai, Patrikwa, there's no money, we are broke. And anything we do, we have to situate it within this context. Right? And listen, some of the things are there. Look at what has happened. This year, January to August, we raised 79.1 billion. We've spent 104.6 billion. What has changed? We've borrowed 25.6 billion. By the end of the year, guess what will happen? We estimate we will raise 133 million. First of all, I want to raise my hand and say, this 133 million, all our extrapolations, and they don't get there. They get around 118 million, right? And you expect to spend another whopping 173 million and borrow 39 billion, another time 173 billion and borrow 39 billion. Our behavior hasn't changed. And because it hasn't changed, you, the man in the street, nothing will change. Listen. Next year, what do we think? We say we'll be able to raise 176 million. But what are we doing? We are going to spend 226 billion. And we will borrow 50.3 billion. Now, when you see that we're going to borrow 50.3 billion, what should scare you as a business person is this. This is T-bills. This is not foreign money. This is T-bills. So there's going to be a crowding out. Where is the access to finance that you're going to get next year? Already, as we sit, 51% of all the financial sector assets are sitting in government paper. Who's going to lend to you? And at what rate? Anyway, the government is borrowing at 33. What do you think you will borrow at? If we are being fair, if you borrow at anything less than twice that, somebody's being kind to you. Right? So, number one, our behavior hasn't changed, so nothing will change. It's sad. Listen, I want to say something. We are still broke and badly broke. Look, January to August, interest payments, 25.3%. But please, bear in mind, we are not paying external debtors. When somebody says we are servicing the debts of the multilateral agencies, good. But those multilateral agencies, actually, they are very kind. Their debts are sometimes spread over 50 years. So they are small. And they are going to be exempt from the debt exchange program anyway. So you haven't paid any external debts. You haven't paid any of the external commercial creditors since the 18th of December last year. And you still spent 25.3%. Abba, we are in trouble. Salaries, 41%. So without paying the external debtors, 66% of our revenue is gone. I keep saying, don't focus on the debt to GDP ratio. That's neither here nor there. Focus on your ability to pay. What makes you broke is that you can't pay. What makes you broke is not how much debt you are carrying. It's whether you can pay or you cannot pay. So it's very simple. We go to now, by the end of the year, still without paying external debtors, would have hit 71% of our revenue. Call me out on that one, that we are still very broke. There's no money to give anybody. There's no money to provide reliefs. There's no money to do anything. So let's set our expectations. Listen, the saddest part is that, forgive me, I've heard 1D, 1F over and over again. But I look at the numbers in the budget and I almost fell down. Look, 2017, growth in the industrial sector, 15.6%. 2018 came down. 2019 came down. 2020, we started contracting. Marginal increase, contracting. In the last 4 years, 3 years, our industrial sector is going down. That's real business. And that's real. That's not paper money that financial sector is playing around, though. This is real jobs. When your industry is contracting, it means people don't have jobs. And guess what? The only reason why we are even getting this is because oil and gas and mining has been delivering small. Take oil and gas away. Take mining away. And guess what? Everything falls down. The worst part is this. Oil and gas and mining are the ones that deliver the least into this economy. Listen, you go to Nigeria, they export $100 from the extractive sector. They get around $50 back into the economy. Come to Ghana, for $100, you know how much you get? About $17. So the sectors that are even growing are the ones that impact us least, because all the money is going out there. The ones that hit us and have value add, I don't know. Nothing has changed. The one relief is that, listen, what is killing all of us is the price of drugs, the price of food, the price of things. When you go to the market, you see, thing Kona has been turned is not GDP. Kona has been turned is that I take my salary and I go to the market and I buy tomatoes, I buy rice, I buy meat. And I can get something done. This year it's been horrendous. We went as high as over 50%. It is coming down. Thanks be to God. But you know what? This is food. Food is still,
It's still very high.
Food is still very high. Food is still very high, and the food risks loom large. There's been alarm bells ringing, but nobody seems to be responding. The breadbasket of Ghana is the whole Volta Lake region. The upper parts flooded. I would like to see a study of how many farms were destroyed. As for the lower parts, after the spillage, we know. So there are risks with food that we better take. And remember,
So
this downward trend is in the harvest season.
So there's imminent food crisis.
And so as we enter Hamatan, we are at 48%. Allah, I beg you, it's trending downwards. But I'll say I'll urge a lot of caution. Because there's a seasonal trend downwards that always happens. In the harvest season, food prices come down.
Right.
So when you're getting food prices coming down in the harvest season, you should be happy, but don't be jumping up and down. No. Life is not cool.
Right.
Life is not cool yet. There's no relief for the common man. I mean, Charlie, listen, you are taking the tax burden off. You're taking what? You see, because there's no money, we have to dig this to get some small thing to say. So what is it? You are removing taxes on what? Electronic vehicles. If you own an electronic vehicle in this room, raise your right hand. Hey! And my listeners, if you own an electric vehicle, raise your right hand.
You have one?
So who is it going to impact? Right? Wait, this is I don't know.
You're saying is there much ado about nothing? Okay.
And forgive me, the women are out there shouting, sanitary pad, sanitary pad, sanitary pad. Me, I'm saying, Oga, my lady, be careful. You know why? Read it very carefully. It's for locally produced sanitary pads.
Yes.
I beg you, go to your average supermarket, check the brands there, and check how many of them are locally produced. There's only one guy, Sunda, who's doing this. There were other companies, they've collapsed. So before you start getting excited and jumping up and down on sanitary pad, please confirm that the one you're using is locally produced and it will be affected. And if you're going to set up a factory to produce, I beg your factory is not set up in 1 month. So calm down.
Right.
Sounds nice, good sound bite, sounds beautiful, but there's no relief for the common woman. No relief for the common man. As for these other things, Ghana Medical Association, they are going to engage. They didn't say they'll give them waivers. They're going to engage, I beg you. It's equivalent of cutting a sword.
Right.
You say what? Tax-free portion of individual incomes to be adjusted. From what to what? We don't know. Please. I don't know. I don't know. As for this, you see, let's be clear. On the expenditure side,
right,
I was expecting something to reduce the size of government. The size of government is too big. We've said this, we sound like a broken record. Right, we sound like a broken record. We have ministers for everything. We have appointees for every thing we can think of, there's an appointee. It comes with a car. It comes with a salary. It comes with a secretariat. Why? Cut this down. These are dark times. You don't have money. It's like me, I'm broke. Right? And I go and see my brother here. He's my brother. We all went to the school. So he's my brother. I go and see, Charlie, help me small. But I say, oh, Charlie, my house, I have 7 people who tend my garden and one who wears my shoe in the morning. I won't reduce that number.
Right.
You say, Joe, are you stupid? And I reckon it's my boy. Look at him, are you stupid? You still want to eat fufu, go to heavy do and eat a big bowl of fufu every morning.
Right.
Start eating cocoa and kose. Hey, listen, we can't avoid this. This one, there's nothing. I won't even bother to go through. There's no attempt to reduce the size of government.
Okay.
Me, I want to end here. Right? There's not much in it. There's nothing in it for the common man. Life is hard. And even the things that are going well for the common man, there are huge risks ahead.
See.
This budget, me, is this man, Patrick Kwa. Thank you.
I see. That's quite interesting. Mr. Joe Jackson, Director of Operations, Dalex Finance, is also a financial analyst, giving us or sharing his perspective on the budget based on some analysis that he's made of the data which has been presented by the Finance Minister. Now, I have a couple of questions for you. So, when you talked about the fact that we shouldn't, get ahead of ourselves with the government waiver on the importation of you had to call it raw materials for the production of locally manufactured sanitary pads. And you said, well, because your argument was, hey, relax, hang on a minute. When you go to the supermarket, how many locally produced ones are there as against the foreign ones? So then the question the person says I shall ask you is, are you suggesting the government should also waive taxes on the importation of these sanitary pads? Are you also considering what that would do to the fiscals of the government's economic management?
The sanitary pad issue is not really about revenue.
Right.
When you take the revenue on sanitary pad, it doesn't really move the needle.
Okay.
The sanitary pad issue is a moral issue.
Right.
Is an issue of treating our girls and women fairly. That men decide the policies, and women have to use these parts.
Right.
They need them to go to school. They need them to go to work. They need them to go to the market. And yet we are unduly taxing something they can't do without.
Right.
So it's not about the revenue side.
Right.
I mean, truly, if there's anything that I don't mind being flooded with cheap products, if they are of a good quality from wherever, I'll say sanitary parts.
Let me now go to Dr. Abdul Ganiyu. It's actually his Dr. Abdul. It's Abudu Abdul, right? I believe. Abudu Abdul Ganiyu. He's a member of the MPP's communications team, but then also he's a lecturer and also a management consultant. Now, Doc, if you watch the presentation that Mr. Joe Jackson just made, what he's saying is that the budget is, simply put, is empty. It's not inspiring. It's not good. It's terrible for the, not terrible, not in those words, but it's not good for the common man.
Yes, I think
what do you have to say about it?
There's a lot in there that certainly can prove that this budget isn't empty.
Right.
We have recognized the fact that we've come from a very, very difficult situation. You simply have to look at pre-COVID, what the state of our economy was, how we grew from 2017 up to about 2019, a GDP growth of 6.5% in 2019. And by 2020, for example, because of COVID, we're growing around 0.5%. So everybody will talk about COVID in the sense that it had a global impact. It had an impact on the global economy. I'm sorry to say, even the flag bearer of the NDC, anytime he steps out of this country, he talks about COVID and its impact on the global economy, of which Ghana isn't an isolation. And indeed, if you talk about the impact on the economy, you just need to look at it from a number of perspectives. One, a lockdown simply meant that economic activity was virtually brought to a halt. You look at organizations in this country introducing various work shifts, for example, where individuals had to work from home, where they had to be shifted for a certain group of people to come to work at some point, another group comes to work at another point. All of that certainly affected productivity. And then on the government side, for example, a number of people who virtually were sitting at home but had to be paid for that entire period. You ask yourself, where was government getting all of these monies from? Never unheard of, never happened in the history of this country. And I wonder if that's happened anywhere in the world before. But we were able to hold the situation, hold our own, pull through, and apart from those on government payroll, for the rest of Ghanaians, for example, the whole objective was let's save lives, let's protect incomes. So even government had to provide some other reliefs, such as free water, free electricity. All of these things were eventually going to have a debilitating effect on the economy.
Right.
And the president never minced words around the time of the COVID management when he said, you know what, we can turn the economy around, but we simply cannot raise the debt. And that statement was a mark of leadership. And not only was that said, but you saw the practical measures, the systems that were put in place, in fact, to be able to save the lives and also to be able to save the livelihoods. That was the impact of COVID. Nobody can run away from that. And just when we thought by January 2022, we're probably out of COVID, I mean, what our friends from the NDC don't want to hear, for example, the Russian-Ukrainian war struck. And again, that had an impact on the global economy. There's no doubt about it. So we appreciate that. All of these factors have brought some hardships to the economy, to individuals. But you see, leadership is not about a red carpet being rolled in front of you for you to walk on. It's also about being confronted with challenges, complex problems, and then you demonstrating the highest level of leadership to be able to overcome them. And I think that is what government led by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and of course his Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, have been able to do over the period. And today as we speak, we turn the corner, yes. when we're doing the mid-year budget review. But as we speak, if you ask me, we are on the home stretch. And I say on the home stretch because if you look at all the macroeconomic indicators from where we sit, they are beginning to show signs of pointing in the right direction. You look at the growth in the real sector. Agriculture is beginning to grow. Of course, as he indicated, industry continued to contract. It continued to plummet in terms of the growth. But that is also because of the pressures of inflation, which has resulted in what you would often refer to as the costs push inflation. So basically, cost of inputs are quite high, and then it also becomes a bit difficult for industry players to access credit because interest rates have gone up over the period. But all of that are just by virtue of the impact of these two very unfortunate factors that this country has had to confront. Okay. But given that inflation is beginning to come down, I mean, from about 54% in 2022, now we are looking at something around 34%. And the signs are that by end of year, we could end up with an inflationary rate of about 15%.
Right.
So clearly, that would begin to signal some positive direction in terms of credits going out to the private sector. Then you expect industry growth to begin to pick up from there. That is the expectation. So we have never said that times are good. What we have said over and over is that we appreciate the difficulties, the challenges that the ordinary Ghanaian is going through.
Right.
But all of us are also witnesses to what the global economy has been through over this particular period. And we've not gone to sleep. We've been working extremely hard at simply turning that situation around. So it's one of candor, it's one of empathy, and even if you look at the tone of this budget statement, it was clear, government admitting what the difficulties are, but also working extremely hard to turn that situation around. So that is my response generally.
Okay.
I would like to deal with some other specific issues.
Sure.
Uncle Joe talked about debt to GDP ratio, the fact that it ought not to be a yardstick so far as dealing with our debts is concerned. But it should be, because at the end of the day, I
think more importantly,
yes,
in dealing with in discussing the health of our economy, because according to him, it can be misleading.
No, it's one of those indicators that gives, if you want, a signal of whether your debts are sustainable or not.
Right.
It is this. I mean, you may disagree, but that's what it is. All right.
No,
that if analyzing,
sorry, Doc. Yes. Isn't your ability to pay more important than what you owe?
But your ability to pay will depend on your asset, for example.
True.
Is that okay? Will depend on your wealth.
Yes.
For example.
Right.
So that if you go to the bank to borrow money, the bank will judge your capacity to pay in terms of what you have. But also, sorry for cutting you. But also depending on the business model that you present to this financial institution. Excuse me.
If you have the whole world,
yes,
but then the bank does not believe that you have what it takes to turn around whatever loan or monies will be given to you, they may not just say, well, because you have security, you have assets, they're just going to give them loan. Because they're not interested necessarily in seizing your property if you're not able to pay. They're more interested in you turning over what it is that you're giving you so you can pay back. So ability to pay back.
So at the end of the day, it's a definition of your total wealth.
All right, that's fine.
And how that can be converted in your ability to continue to pay whatever loans you have contracted.
Valid point.
Right?
Valid point.
So a debt to GDP ratio is simply an indication of, first, the size of the economy. Is that okay? And how much we'll be able to absorb to be able to pay back.
True.
That is simply what it means.
Okay.
So debt to GDP is significant. And we have made issue of it. The IMF and other agencies have had issues with it. And it is one of the reasons that has gotten out to the IMF, because they would say our debts were no more sustainable.
Right.
Because they would look at that particular indicator. But from where we sit, it has started coming down. From over 70%, we are now doing around 66%. It will go below 60% perhaps by end of 2024. So that clearly tells you that we are doing something about growing the economy, expanding the economy, so that we will simply have what it takes to pay off. Because taxes could come in, other revenues could come in once your economy continues to grow. Then you have the capacity to pay off your loans. So that's a very important point I needed to make. Then, of course, the issue about industry growth. I mean, the fact that I said inflationary pressures may have caused that. We expect that to ease. I mean, inflation is expected to ease, and that will begin to impact more positively on the interest rates, so that you begin to see more growth in the industrial sector. He and others should be able to give more loans to the private sector, and that is what they need to be able to generate the growth.
Yeah, they will.
Now, taxes being waived on sanitary pads, and the fact that he feels it's not important, or if you want, it may not immune benefits.
He's just saying don't be too excited about it.
The extent of advantages may not be very high, for example.
Yeah.
You see, there are two ways of looking at it when you are using taxes. Yet, one is to reduce prices, for example, for the average person to be able to afford. But the other is how you trigger production with it. So if he feels that there are few Ghanaian companies that are into the production of sanitary
But he mentions
pads.
one.
So the whole idea behind this is, how do we make that industry attractive for those Ghanaian companies, for example? The Ghanaian companies that are already there, they can step up production. They will be able to produce a lot more volumes, create a lot more jobs, and at the end of the day, that adds to economic growth.
Right.
Now, there are other investors or other business people who would equally think of setting up machines or sites or whatever to be able to go into the production of sanitary pads. So that is certainly positive for the economy. So even if the short-term effect may not translate into lower prices of sanitary pads so much, but in the long term, you are addressing a problem. And that is very, very fundamental for us to look at. Now, on the expenditure side, we know the fiscal consolidation measures government has been pursuing over the last year, and that again is showing tremendous results if you look at deficits, for example, and if you look at government expenditure rationalization efforts. So all of that does give an indication that indeed we are headed to the states we were before COVID and before the Russian-Ukrainian war. Then we can begin to set the tone for the higher economic growth and development that we expect. We have never said that we are out of the woods yet, but currently everybody can see the trajectory, and all we need to do is to continue to pursue some of these measures, and at the end of the day, we will get back to the desirable economic growth. Again, on livelihoods and the ordinary person, when he talked about Kwatrikwa and everything that comes with it. Look, government has continued to expand the LEAP program. Currently, we are talking about more than 300,000 beneficiaries, and even the amounts that are given to them have increased to a very large extent. The school feeding program, we've expanded it. Some 3.8 million Ghanaian pupils, as we speak, are benefiting from that. And that has led to increased enrollment in our schools. Free SHS, of course, is still on. And year on year, the numbers are increasing. Government continue to find the money to pay for our kids to be in school free of charge. All of these are benefits for the ordinary people, including the Abosokai people you were talking about. Once they have their kids in school, for example, they don't pay school fees anymore. Free, National Health Insurance Scheme. We're talking about 16 million subscribers as we speak. So virtually more than half of the population of Ghana are currently subscribers of the NHIS. So all of these are reliefs. And for these things to continue under an IMF program, I'm sure it's what continue to shock everyone. Because normally, the conditionalities that will come with IMF programs, we all know that social interventions such as these Would often be scrapped. At the end of the day, a freeze on public sector employment, but government continue to employ.
Right.
So sometimes you ask yourself, really, how is the NPP government able to do all of these? Because a lot of things have been done new that we haven't seen before under similar programs. They had the IMF program. At the time, we didn't have COVID.
Okay.
At the time, we didn't have Russian-Ukrainian war. Okay. But let's go and take a look at economic growth as of 2016. For example, it was so low, all right, without all of these interventions. So sometimes what I think of is, what if it was the NDC that was in power at this point, where Ghana had to be confronted with, let's say, COVID-19, had to be confronted with the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Okay.
I mean, I just wonder what the situation would have been. So like I said, it's not a roll-up of a red carpet for you to walk on as a leader.
Right.
You're confronted with complex problems, complex challenges, and you demonstrate the capacity to overcome them.
All right.
And that's exactly what this government is doing.
All right, great. So let me do this. I have tons of messages that have come through. I'll read them. Don't worry. But let me just say that
Agenda 111 as well. It's ongoing. I mean, he was talking about where are the hospitals and whatnot. There are various levels of completion.
Right.
In his constituency district, I believe he would find Agenda 111 projects there. So all of these things
there's a lot
are
happening.
ongoing.
That's fine. So one of the investment opportunities in Ghana now, as we speak, is buying a genuine land. And let me introduce you to Estate Masters Limited. Fantastic company, fantastic organization. They're known for this. Now, they have the Dwellers Court, which is located within the Ningo Pram district, 15 minutes drive from the Central University, and the Nest Cottage at Chopoli, close to the newly proposed airport, and 15 minutes drive from Saglemi. The Saglemi Government Affordable Housing Project with just 22,500, you can actually become a landowner. Now, call these numbers. Please take a pen and paper. If you have a pencil, that's fine. HB pencil, that's fine. You can write this down. 0500, so 0500 30 4447. 0500 30 4447. There's an alternative number, 0241 36 3776. 0241 363776. When you call, tell them you heard it on Inside Pages on Metro Television. And you never know, you may be entitled to, you may get some more discount. So, Mr. George, Honorable George Kweku Ricketts Hagan, he's a member of Parliament for Cape Coast South, a member of the Finance Committee, a former Deputy Finance Minister under the Etswal NDC regime, and so he knows exactly what he's talking about. Doc, you say this budget is empty. This budget is uninspiring. There's nothing to write home about. Ghanaians should brace themselves for tougher times. Why do you say that?
Thank you very much, Moru. And I should say good morning to our viewers and to my brother, Joe. We are actually brothers, Joe Jackson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we go a long way.
I see.
Many years.
Okay.
Yeah. Many years.
Oh, that's interesting.
Many. Beyond 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we are all growing old gracefully.
You're aging gracefully. I'm not sure about that. We thank God.
And good morning to Doc.
Yeah.
Abdul. First of all, I just something that Doc said that had the NDC been in power, he basically wouldn't have known where we will be. One thing I'm glad about, and we wouldn't have to say that, is had Nana Akufo-Addo been in power, what would Ghana be? Because if Nana had not been elected, the president had not been elected, will probably go down in history as the best president we never got. Now we have him, and we've seen the disaster, in Ghana's economy, the the Nana Akufo-Addo Bawumia presidency. Yes, you're right. We said, again, I need to comment Joe for this fantastic presentation. And Doc, the lady Doc, that
Priscilla,
who started the program.
Yes.
I was here thinking, today and tomorrow we are having the budget workshop.
Right.
And this time we are not going to any hotel. We are doing it in Parliament. So it's going on, or it's going to go on very soon, And I wish Joe and Doc who were able to get you to be, our resource persons,
Right.
to share some of these things with us. If you look at the budget, you're right in saying that we have called the budget empty. I mean, I'm sure when we say the budget is empty, you understand what we are talking about. That it did not meet the expectations, especially of the ordinary man, as Joe has described it. An alternative name for the budget could have been Kwatirikwa. Sorry, Kwatirikwa budget. So Kwatirikwa Obama Otama.
Right.
Yeah. Now, it is empty. It's uninspiring, obviously. But I will also want to add that the budget is actually also dysfunctional.
Really?
Yeah, and
That's
I will
You demonstrate that.
why it's dysfunctional. And for that matter, there is nothing to write home about. This we know is the last full budget of the NPP government,
Right.
or last budget of Nana Akufo-Addo. What we will get beyond this is the mid-year review, and then the budget that is written, the 3 months budget that we do before elections, so that the government can continue to spend up until, say, March, before a new budget is written by the new government. So this is more or less a handing over note to the next administration,
Right.
which, God willing, will be NDC. But it is a very, very bad handing over note. I mean, if this is coming to you as a handing over note, it's a very, very bad one. Why is it bad and why is it dysfunctional? A major liability of this country is not actually in the budget. And that is our external debt repayment. I mean, I heard them saying that we are paying a multilateral. I haven't actually seen anything in the budget to indicate that. But we do know that the government has stopped paying its external debt. And the Ghana's external debt, as they have here, depending on which exchange rate you use, I think they use about 11. The external debt is about 326.7 billion. Mm-hmm. But actually, our external debt, and again, as I said, depends on if you use the exchange rate of today.
Right.
But again, this was in September data, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt by using $11, 11 cedis to the dollar. Mm-hmm. But our external debt is actually around 30 billion.
Right.
We owe the Chinese $1.9 billion. We owe the Paris Club about $2 billion. Mm-hmm. We owe non-Paris clubs, that's those who don't subscribe to the Paris Club, about $3.8 billion. So that, if you put that all together, that's our bilateral debt. Mm-hmm. And that's $7.7 billion US. Then, which we are not paying at the moment, we are not servicing at the moment. Now you look at our multilateral, that is the World Bank, IMF, African Development Bank, that's $8.8 billion. They claim they are servicing it, but they didn't show anywhere here. The elephant in the debt room is the Eurobond, the commercial debt, which today stands at $13.4 billion US. So if you put all three together, that gives you all of them together, that gives you $29.9 billion. That's $30 billion. If you convert by 12 points, that will give you about, over 350 or something. Mm-hmm. So basically, by that computation, our debt as it stands today, mm-hmm. in addition to the domestic debt, we have crossed the 600 billion line.
That's a lot.
But they have it here as 567 billion. Okay, let's take it like that.
Okay.
Now, this budget is dysfunctional because the repayment or the servicing of our debt should have been part of our expenditure. By that not being here, and they telling us there's a line, just a line in the budget that says that they are preparing to negotiate on the external debt.
Right.
That's all they say. So we are not paying the external debt. It's not in this budget. I don't know when it will come in. Even if they do any negotiation, maybe the media review, they might come and tell us that they are revising the budget because we are now going to start paying our external debt. Or it won't happen at all until the end of the year where we'll go for an election and then NDC government comes to power and all these are lumped on the NDC government. And we need to adjust the budget and all these will come through. So basically, that is not in the budget. And to have that in the budget will change pretty much everything. At the moment, we have a deficit of 50 billion without the servicing of our external debt. So if you look on the domestic side, we are paying about 55 billion servicing domestic debt, which is a little less than our external debt. So supposing we are spending another 50 billion in servicing our external debt, our deficit would have been 100 billion, not 50. And as Joe pointed out, where is the money to finance even this 50 billion is going to come from? We are shut out of the external, market. What we can get from the multilaterals is probably what we have. And don't forget, we have already taken 600 million of IMF loan, the 3 billion. If you add that to your debt, because that money we have taken, if you add that to your debt, the debt goes beyond the $30 billion that we are talking about. So by us not servicing this debt, by that not being factored into our budget, this budget straight away becomes dysfunctional. So whatever gains, whether it's a fiscal gains or a deficit, it's not really the true picture. So our deficit, Joe, is not 50 billion.
Sorry.
It's more than that. The fiscal space that they claim they have created, in terms of the other things that they are going to do, this will be a game changer if that should come in. And we don't know when that will come. Now, how can you say that you have turned the corner? When you have stopped paying, even if you take your own budget, your own house budget, you know your salary, you know the expenses that you make, but you know you have taken a loan from Joe, who give out loans to keep people alive. You've taken loans from Joe, and you have unilaterally, without any discussions with Joe, stopped paying. And then you walk around in the street of Accra and say you have turned the corner. Which corner have you turned? Doc said that they are not out of the woods yet. So I can't see how they can be in the woods and turn the corner. When you turn the corner, Doc, in the woods, you are lost. If you are in the woods and you turn the corner, you are lost. And that is pretty much what this budget is. This is a lost budget. I mean, I don't want to go into this discussion of Russia-Ukraine war. Look, it's been oversubscribed in debate. We have talked about this for so long. If you build your house with straw and the storm comes and basically, blow your house away, of course, you will blame the storm. But when you get up and your neighbors' buildings are standing, then you begin to blame the materials upon which you have built your house on. That's basically what happened to Ghana. All these 2019 numbers they were giving us, we were challenging the numbers, macroeconomic numbers that, look, these are not the true numbers. They said they are the true numbers, and all that. Then COVID came to expose them. Pretty much every corner of the world was affected by COVID. We were lucky. And we were lucky. I mean, I know the government won't take credit for what they did to save us while we are all alive today. But far from that, I'm surprised. I haven't heard much about the Israeli one, the Israeli Hamas one. Well, because I was expecting it in this budget. These guys are looking for wars and pandemics to back them. So That is why I said I will show you that it is dysfunctional.
Right.
That's what makes this budget dysfunctional to me. So if they handed Ghana's economy over to you today, and this is your handing over notes, there are items that are not here, and they will come back to haunt you.
Right.
Now, when you talk about on the Joe's demonstration with the industry, something that is troubling in this budget, and this time I realized that they have cut it short. You know, in the beginning, but what they failed to do is that they didn't cut it short in the appendix, because this is basically more or less the qualitative part of the budget.
Right.
The appendix will give you the quantitative of this budget. When you look there, all the things that they were trying to take off the qualitative, I actually put it there in the quantitative. One of them is the industry's performance, you know, as a percentage of the total GDP.
GDP.
And the graph Joe showed is actually not here. It was here last year. If you look in like by numbers, you can see that since they started 1D, 1F, industry's contribution to GDP has actually been going down.
Yeah, but that's an irony, isn't it?
Is what?
That's an irony. It should rather be that industry's contribution to GDP should be going up.
Should be going up. That's what I'm telling you.
It's an irony.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
You know, basically, mathematicians will tell you inversely proportional.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
it's been going down. Yet, in this budget, they tell us that they have created 169 1D, 1F. More. I hear Kwame Nkrumah built 70 or 77 factories. Yes, the population was small. But if you have really created 169 industries in this country,
It should impact positively on our
it should
GDP.
impact positively
On our
on our
GDP.
GDP. And Joe was right in saying that it is the extraction industry, the mining, that is keeping the industrial sector alive. Nothing to do with this 1D, 1F, because 1D, 1F as a policy, a good policy, we all know we need to industrialize, it's been implemented badly by this government. So that is the picture there, and Joe painted it right. I actually want to have I have asked him for his presentation.
The presentation.
Because it's fantastic. It gives you a clear picture of what is going on. And that's exactly what is going on.
Okay.
And we've gotten to a extent there where we were even in negative. The picture is no different when you go to the agriculture side.
Right.
And I wish you add that to
His presentation.
Since they started planting for food and jobs, 2017, agriculture, particularly crops, which is what they are planting, contribution to GDP has also been going down. You know, there are some outliners too, but it's been going down. So what is it that this government is planting? That the more they plant, the less we harvest. You can see the picture. And the likes of Joe, I'm sure Dr. Wu, you can also see it from the inflation side. The bulk of the inflation we have is food inflation. So again, what is this government planting? That prices of food keeps going up and not down. You know why inflation is coming down? Yes, there was some element of exogenous factors, you know, external issues in the inflation, which is to do with their favorite Russia-Ukraine war and the supply chain issues. But the Bank of Ghana was actually what they should have done in terms of addressing the challenges that we are facing in inflation, which were more of a supply side issue. The Bank of Ghana, who addresses demand side of inflation, was actually using demand solutions to address. That is what resulted in the Bank of Ghana printing money. They took charge of what is supposed to be a fiscal policy, and they were using monetary policy to address it. And they resulted in printing money also for this government. When the IMF came in, you see what has happened?
Yeah.
The inflation that is going down is as a result of the money that the Bank of Ghana has stopped printing, which itself is inflationary. So now, the real inflation, which is the food inflation, in Joe's graph, and they have that graph here, similar graph here. The food inflation is now on the top of the inflation food chain. So these two policies, which are supposed to be the two major policies out of the three, the MPP major flagship policies, free education, planting for food and jobs, 1D, 1F. These two have failed. And educationists and people who understand education will tell you free education has also failed. Yes, we've gotten a lot of people to go to school. That is a good thing. But the quality of education these kids have received is another matter. How they live and go through the free education on their various schools is also another story altogether.
Okay.
So this government has basically failed. And let me end with this. We are 1 trillion economy that we are.
Yes, just briefly, because we're running out of time.
You know, and Dr. Pressler said it. It's actually meaningless in an economy like ours, where we eat cedis, which is supposed to be the basis of this.
Yeah.
If you want to do this on dollar and try to compare it with whatever NDC left as the size of the economy, if you do it in dollars, it will probably give you a better picture as you strip off inflation and other things. But 1 trillion, somebody told me that 1999, I was in the country, 1999 or so, we also crossed the. When you have a system like we have, with that type of inflation we have, if you are quoting the growth of the economy in city terms, two things happen. One of them is rebasing. Rebasing adds money to the economy.
Right.
You did rebasing in 2018 and changed the base year from 2006 or some 2010.
Okay.
You also have an exchange rate that is running away from all of us. So if you convert the size of your economy in dollars to cedis, you will be reaching 1 trillion.
Wow.
And you should be worried.
Okay. Honorable George Ricketts Hagan. He is the Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South and also a member of the Finance Committee and also Deputy Finance Minister. So we're going to be concluding our conversation on the economic.